Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed and we are reading the Philosophical Midwifery textbook. Why are we wasting our time when we could be outside playing the sports ball? Well, because Philosophical Midwifery is the new paradigm of understanding human problems that will allow us to understand the nature of the repeating cycles of failure, the repeating cycles of negative states of mind, the repeating cycles of self-sabotage that we experience in our lives, understand its cause, and understand how to address it to become what is sometimes called free. Anybody interested in spirituality? People who are interested in spirituality usually play around with the word freedom. What does it mean to be free? And one of the great puzzles in spirituality is how come even people who have high experiences, enlightenment experiences, which as we understand in our philosophy reading is the ability to experience the realm of being. We call it the metaphysical realm because it's prior to physics, metaphysics, prior to physics, but it's experienceable. You don't have to believe anyone. You don't have to reduce the experience to physical causes. The experience of being and mind itself or eternity, you don't have to explain it away with physical mechanical causes. So what's sometimes called reductionism. Hey, any high experience or profound experience or beautiful experience, that's just serotonin and endorphins squirting away in the brain. That's all it is. Just like Rembrandt is nothing other than $4 worth of paint on $10 worth of canvas. That's all. There's nothing more profound than the physical parts that share in the principles. Gravity isn't really a thing. It's just a random byproduct of physical stuff. Doesn't make sense when you start thinking about it, does it? Because 2 and 2 always equals 4, and that's not a physical thing. The physical things partake in it. Gravity isn't a physical principle. It's a principle that extends over the whole universe that physicality participates in. And likewise, if you've ever seen a Rembrandt or if you've ever had a profound experience of reality, one thing you'll immediately recognize for yourself. No need to believe anybody. You see it for yourself. One thing people say is, it's the most real thing I've ever experienced. Far more real. It was like my waking life was a dream. The metaphor Socrates uses in the Phaedo is, it's like you've been a fish underwater and suddenly you jump above the surface and you realize, there are all these people living up here on this surface. I didn't even know there was such a thing. And he extends the analogy because you can go beyond that. So just as a fish is to human, what he thinks as the atmosphere is actually the water, but so too somebody in being will look down at a physical person on the surface. What he thinks as the atmosphere, as air, would be like water to somebody in the realm of being. Far less real, much lower. Now that's not to say water doesn't have a kind of existence. It's just not really the atmosphere. It's not the higher level anyway. So, no need to dismiss profound experiences. Although if we tend to dismiss what's most significant and profound in our own direct experience or our own understanding, we might want to wonder about what could be causing that. That's what we looked at last time. One of the things we sacrifice to pick up these kinds of limiting beliefs about self and reality, we sacrifice what we know for ourselves through direct experience. So one thing we're doing in Philosophical Midwifery is going back to where we left off, picking up our journey. Where do we leave the bag behind to pick up somebody else's bag? Someone else's bag of stupid beliefs that they got from their parents and from their parents and from their parents all the way back to the cave. We've been carrying a bag of useless beliefs, and my goodness, don't we have a sore back because of it? Time to let go of that or give it back to whoever you got it from and go back to where you left off. Now, this extends all the way even to philosophy, because that's the question that we've started with today. Even though you might have had those experiences, spiritual experiences or non-physical experiences that we understand in philosophy, that's what makes philosophy unique among spiritual traditions. It's a complete one in that it has understanding as well, allowing you to not just jump into whatever stage, you can understand the whole thing, making it an art, making it a paradigm for spirituality. So just because you've had an experience of, what's the word? Nous, direct experience, what we sometimes translate in the crappy translations of Socrates as knowledge. Now I call it crappy because knowledge doesn't cut it. We already use knowledge to talk about physical knowledge. So we need another word. Well, let's just use the word that the Greeks use, nous. Just because you've had an experience of nous doesn't mean you've freed yourself from your problems. That's two completely different activities. Now, people who've had those experiences might want to pretend one comes with the other. Maybe because they don't want to do the work, or maybe because they lack an understanding of philosophical midwifery. Maybe even their spiritual experience came through luck, or through chance, or chanting, and not through understanding. So they don't even really understand how and what it was that they experienced in nous. Nevertheless, we can ask the question, how come people who've experienced nous still have their problems? Now, equally so, we can say, well, hang on a second, if we're doing philosophical midwifery, freeing ourselves from our problems, does that make us enlightened? Well, yes and no. There is a kind of enlightenment state, or a higher state of being that we can recover, where we have a kind of clarity, free of our problems. But, as with the other, that doesn't mean we have nous. It can free us from the psychic parasites that make it difficult to study what is needed to reach nous, and it can free us from those false beliefs that say, there's no such thing as nous, everything is physical. You can explain everything with chemicals. Those sorts of voices how do you find truth if you have a voice saying, there's no such thing as truth, everything is just opinion. And crazy Aunt Mary's opinions is just as good as Einstein's opinions. That's why she's posting all this stuff on Facebook about the world being flat. She thinks she's just as wise as a scientist. So those beliefs, and of course, because we are developing a system of understanding, we can understand them. That one that dismisses knowledge is relativism. Everything is relative to your own perspective and opinion. The way of, and of course, understanding comes along with the state of mind. If that's the way you understand the world, that limits the abilities or the reach of your states of mind. It has a kind of base state of mind. Everything is relative, kind of confusion, kind of anger, kind of irritation. Because why does no one listen to my dumb opinions? I think they're the best. Well, excuse me, Aunt Sally, you can't simultaneously say no opinions are more or less valid and want people to pay attention to yours. So you might be living a very lonely life. And by the way, you might be thrown in prison if you decide that you can act on your dumb opinions. My opinion about medicine is just as valid as someone with understanding. No, that's medical malpractice. You can't do that. So these are systems of understanding. No one's in completely. Even the people who say everything's relative are not in that 100% of the time. Of course, they wouldn't practice more. You'd hope they wouldn't practice medicine. They're selectively using that at times to justify their certain opinions. Now, what we're looking at in midwifery is, well, why? Why do we care so much about dumb beliefs? Well, it goes worse than that. Those dumb beliefs cause all your problems. Well, the large majority of human problems, fundamental ones. That's called a pathologos, a blind a certain fundamental false belief about self and reality that we're blindly loyal to, that dictates our lives, so we can call it fate. That's what we want to become free of. And we can understand that way of dismissing nous as, oh, it's just chemicals firing. There's no such thing as beauty. That's just a chemical. There's no such thing as 2 + 2 is 4. That's just a chemical. There's no such thing as experience of nous. That's just a chemical. Now you might say, well, you can see that there is a biochemical equivalent. You can't, so long as you are a living, you have a physical form, you can't not have a physical form. So even if you are experiencing this or that experience of nous, you will have a corresponding neurochemical state. You can't not be physical. Well, in one sense you are, because you're separated from the physical, but you could still look at the physical body and see what it's doing. It's important because there's lots of Platonic dialogues which describe Socrates as doing physical things, like standing under a tree for 3 days. That's something physical. You could measure that. You could measure the chemicals. And the irony is, the people who don't understand philosophy will say, oh, he's got very good endurance. Not realizing that doesn't make sense. You don't endurance yourself standing under a tree. That would, I don't know, that's David Blaine sort of stuff. But if you're out of body, that's quite easy. It would be quite easy, we can imagine. Okay, formally, that's Stoicism. To try and use the language of Platonic philosophy without recourse to the realm of being. By the way, Socrates was able to do that because he's such a tough alpha, sigma, badass guy. That's Stoicism. Oh, you have to try hard. Stoic philosophy. Now, so what? Well, we can reflect on why we might be loyal to those beliefs. That can be understood, and understood within a greater system. So if we can recognize materialism, or it's all relative, and reductionism as lower steps within a hierarchy, as we are developing that understanding, we might feel like, oh no, give up. There is no truth. Hang on a second. If it can be shown through understanding and directly verifiable through experience, that this level of materialism is a low level, why am I listening to it? Why does that voice that says, oh, just the physical world is what matters, go and get rich or something? Why does that sound believable, even though I can, with reason, understand this as a small, a low level within a greater whole? I can understand that system. In other words, why are there beliefs that pull us in spite of what we might understand with reason? That's called a block. That which blocks us from reason, evidence, understanding, and nous. And those states that we're after beyond even nous, which we have fun with in philosophy. So, we have to do something about those blocks. And you really only have a few choices. One choice is to give up, succumb, lie down and accept your fate and become a slave to whoever gave you their bag of nonsense beliefs. Another way is set lesser goals so you can kind of avoid by being sneaky in some way, and which is kind of a giving up. You can develop a kind of energy, chi, ki, maybe meditating under a waterfall for 40 years at the ashram or something to push through. Or, use those chemicals that we talked about to induce a state. Of course, there are problems with that. It's not guaranteed. There is usually diminishing returns when it's used as a kind of a doorway and not a window. May be okay for a glimpse, but you get diminishing returns because you can't use a window that gives you a lookout as a doorway to walk through. And that's sometimes called chasing the dragon. You never catch the dragon. So that's, by the way, another way of understanding that is artificial chi. smoking a plant or whatever it is. So it can work for a time, usually has diminishing returns, but also doesn't remove your problems, just allows you to push through them for a while, to have an experience of this or that. Okay, all of these options sound bad. What's the best option? That's what we're reading today. How to understand the cause. Whether we're doing philosophy or midwifery, it's all about causes. To be mature and rational is to understand causes. Wow, we read earlier in chapter 1, Pierre walking along the Roman road to fight the Nazis. Wow, I am fighting the barbarian fascist Nazis, just like the Romans who built this road built it so that they could fight their barbarian hordes. In other words, we're not learning anything. Why are we just repeating it? Why are our political leaders not able to solve the problems? Why do we have a looming Nazi threat even today? Still. Why do we have fascism just with a few extra steps that we call capitalism? Why are we not solving that problem? Why are we letting people spend, I don't know, $100,000 for lunch when people don't even have a house to read in? Yeah, I was going to say live in, but that might be even better. A house to read in. These are absurdities. Why are we not addressing the causes of them? Well, that's the problem. The question is, why are we not solving them? Because we're not addressing the causes. What prevents us from addressing the causes? In other words, if your computer breaks down, you get the IT guy to have a look at how to fix it, and he'll turn it off and on first. And if that doesn't fix it, he'll want to understand the cause of the problem. Why then are we so immature and irrational, not looking at the cause of human problems like capitalism and fascism and war and genocide and destruction of the environment and enslavement of people and all that sort of thing? All these obvious problems. Even divisions among spiritual groups. Why don't we not come to a mutual understanding of what's true? Because we're not looking at causes. So what are we doing today? We're looking at causes. What's the cause of that which causes our problems? Now, we talked about how as there's a principle of metaphor in our universe, or likeness, that can be expressed as above, so below, or as the macrocosm, so the microcosm. In other words, by understanding the nature of the problems that we experience as individuals, we can also reflect it onto our culture to understand our global problems. Why are there these, like we said, about fighting the Nazis or the Nazis doing a genocide? Well, there's a genocide happening right now that no one seems to be doing anything about. Why are we so irrational and immature and failing to look at causes? So again, what we can understand within ourselves, we can reflect onto the many to understand that as well. So we're becoming rational and mature, which is one of the questions that we had in the first chapter, one of the big questions about our human species. And what makes us rational and mature? Reflecting on, understanding, and addressing fairly causes. So, what's the cause of our repeating cycles of problems? Something called the pathologos. Okay, well, what causes it? Which is a fundamental false belief about self and reality that diminishes it in some way. Lack of worthiness of self, or a lack of integrity, intelligibility, beneficial care of reality. By the way, what does reductionism, reducing things to physical squirtings, do? It diminishes the intelligibility, the understandability, and knowability of reality as a whole. There is no experience of mind itself, of consciousness itself, of that which is the cause of the universe. You are literally diminishing the integrity of the higher aspects of reality. So that can be, now of course, that that could just be because you haven't been introduced to Platonic philosophy yet, which is very likely, because all of the translations of Socrates up until the last 5 or so years have been garbage. The translators have literally been, because they've lacked midwifery, they've been mistranslating, projecting, or leaving out. We call that interpretation, to add what isn't there or leave out what is, or mistranslate all of the key words that point to being. So even if you paid a lot of money to study Socrates and Plato at university, chances are you haven't been actually reading what he's been saying. Thankfully, we have the Balboa translation.
Have you read Brand at all?
It's the best translation. It has the Greek and it has those words. Partly because the translator has been studying philosophy properly and has been doing midwifery, so allowing him to translate properly. So it could be that maybe you haven't heard about it, but even if you do hear about it, and if you're watching this, now you have, and you still have a belief that diminishes, you still have an impulse to diminish the integrity of the reality, that you can know reality all at once, then that's the kind of problem we want to look at, because as soon as you hear about it, you can get excited and start to read and subscribe to this channel and get the free Balboa translation of Socrates and read the midwifery text with us on this channel. But if something comes up and says, no, don't do that, there's something more important to do than understanding, or than removing your problems and understanding the true nature of self and reality, you're escaping fate and finding destiny. There's something more important than escaping fate and discovering destiny. That's absurd. By definition, that's absurd. Well, you got a pathologos. You've got a block. I got a block that might point back to a pathologos. So, if that's the cause of our blocks, where do we get it? What's the cause of this pathologos? That's what we're reading. Okay, and last time we had this thing here, this blackboard, where we were talking, where we recognized that the text can give us the positive or the negative, but will often leave out the other side, so we've got to fill it in. So we did that for maturity. So sometimes he would give us what it means to be immature. To, like, for instance, only express yourself and what's most important and meaningful to you at rare times, and only in a kind of way where you're imitating your parents when they did it to you. That's immaturity. So we had to find out what would be the positive, what would be maturity, revealing yourself in a wide range of ways. Hey, don't just complain, talk about what you love. Do you notice beauty? Do you talk about what you see as most beautiful? Do you talk about what you see as most puzzling? Do you share your insights and understanding? If not, do it. Reveal yourself in a wide range of ways. Your highest self. And that's in part why we have a community. You can join this Discord group that we have, which is a group of people who are fellow-minded adventurers, let's hope, with whom you can develop a relationship and reveal yourself, specifically your highest experiences and understanding that you're developing on this channel, so you can practice revealing yourself with people who are also on the journey. Sometimes he would give us what it means to be mature, and we have to do the opposite. We'd have to fill in this side. So he gave us in the text, we have to call into question the integrity of what appears sincere and beautiful. And that requires a courage and a focus on understanding. What's the opposite of that? Cowardice and a focus on beliefs. So what people who are interested in beliefs, we talked about crazy Aunt Susan. Hey, do you want to understand how to, like, you seem to be very interested in the shape of the earth. Hey, you want to do some understanding and some study in astronomy? No, I don't care about understanding. I think my dumb beliefs are sufficient. If I believe it, then it's true to me. That's immature. That's what a child would say. Hello, welcome to the chat. Oh, Tim Philosophy, cool name. Welcome to the chat. A child would say, well, actually, you have to, you have to go to school or something. Well, I believe that I'm a princess. Now we tolerate that when they're children, but we need to recognize that we have to develop an interest in understanding over belief and develop courage. What's courage? Well, we talked about that earlier today. To do what our reasoning says is true, even though our feelings are saying don't do it. So if we learn about philosophy, that there is experience, philosophy is a training of your mind to purify your false beliefs and develop your understanding of the realm of being, dianoia, through the structure of the logos and the structure of the dialectic, so that you can separate your soul from the body, experience the realm of being. That experience we call nous. And of course, that's just the beginning, because you got to go back, you got to reflect on it, you got to understand it, you got to go into it in greater depth. Apply your mastery and practice of the dialectic to even dialectic about the aspects of being, what's called the eidos, formerly mistranslated as forms, so that you can ask questions about the cause. So, we've been talking about the importance of causes for understanding and maturity and rationality. So even the realm of being has a cause. So that's our journey, and all of that should not feel comfortable, should not feel familiar, should trouble you, should give you angst and frustration, perplex you. It should. If it doesn't, then, well, I doubt you're a human being, because all human beings born into a family where you forget this and you develop this. You can develop the pathologos beliefs that cause you problems and blocks, and you have to develop your understanding to experience those things that you once knew. So, if you are so frustrated and puzzled by these sorts of things, what do? You do it anyway. That's courage. You do what reason and understanding tells you should do, that we are learning for ourselves, not believing anyone, until it's obvious. Then you don't need courage anymore. It's just obvious. Or maybe courage upgrades into a different kind of courage, and we have a question about what the heck is this mysterious virtue called phronesis. It's a big question we're carrying on this channel. What is phronesis? The virtue that Socrates says, hey, all these other virtues like courage, useless, unless you can trade them in for the virtue that makes it all worth it, phronesis. By the way, how long have we had the word phronesis? About 5 years. How long has it been in the text? About 2,500 years. Why? So, we are in a unique, pivotal part of history where we can actually read the text for ourselves without being yoinked, beheaded. For most of our history, if you actually had one of these books, you would be killed by the people who wanted to be the authorities of beliefs. And so what's that? Well, images of authority, that's immaturity. Believing in authority, it's in this column. And we have to find it. Well, okay, what's the opposite? What's the opposite of believing in authority? And that's what I left for you guys to do. So these are the negatives that we read last time. You've got to fill in the positives, because you got to do it. Don't just believe this guy. You got to do it for yourself. That's the exercise. That's the activity. And of course you have to do it because it's formally meditation. A single-minded focus with a kind of state of mind of puzzlement, being frustrated, being at a loss. Aporia is the fancy Greek word for that. But also, the one thing that's lacking from other spiritual traditions, The logos, the thing that they reject understanding because of their immaturity or loyalty to beliefs. So it's a kind of meditation, a single-minded focus with an open, curious state of mind, while also using your highest understanding. So we wouldn't want to neglect that aspect of excellence, otherwise it wouldn't be very excellent, would it? So that's why I'm encouraging you to do it for yourself. All right, so courage, what's the opposite? Cowardice. What does it mean to be mature? Return to your parents and families and use your understanding of the logos and pathologos to address them and do so successfully. Successfully challenge the family pathologos, and that's maturity. So we've got a new definition, which is what we get. One of the things we get, along with nous, many things that you benefit from by doing the dialectic, which is just a structure of thinking, which is the structure of spirituality, which is the structure of understanding, which is the structure of philosophy, which is also the structure of music, and also geometry, and so on and so on. It has to be because it's the paradigm. All right, I hit all of the drops accidentally, but it's the paradigm, which is great because if it's supposed to be a mystical practice, then it should be single focus. Wouldn't make sense if there's one paradigm for this one and that paradigm for that one, because why? Because then you can ask, hang on a second, if there's a paradigm for music and there's a paradigm for spirituality and a paradigm for politics and a paradigm for solving problems and a paradigm for astronomy and all these different paradigms, you could ask, well, hang on a second, what do we do? What do we do? We look for the cause. In other words, what's the cause? Another way of saying that in philosophy is go from the many to the one. What's the one that caused the many? In other words, if there are all these different paradigms, then we would ask, well, hang on a second, what's the paradigm that gave rise to those paradigms? What's the model that gave rise to all these models? And why aren't we looking at that? Well, we are. That's what we're doing with the dialectic here. So neat. We're doing something pretty cool and beneficial. That which allows us to understand the cause of our fate, being tied on the train tracks to the repeating cycles of failure, negative states of mind, problems over and over and over until you hit that brick wall because it's a train tracks. That's what we call fate. Escaping that, that's the kind of clarity, but it ain't enlightenment. Well, it's not the other kind of enlightenment. It's a clarity, it's a freedom that you can use to climb the actual ladder up that this train tracks is a shadow of. So that's reaching destiny. Can't do one without the other. So you can say, oh, there's a nice X and Y axis here. So we could judge our progress. How far up are we on this axis? And how far are we along in our problem? Or how free are we from our problem on this axis? So every human being is going to be somewhere in this arc. That's important because if we are developing an understanding and not just an understanding, but a experience and vision of the ideal, we would want to be able to function with it, use it, and use it beneficially to benefit the people we interact with, benefit our friends, benefit our family, benefit ourselves. You're in a relationship with yourself till you know it. So what's that? That's art. Artfully using a paradigm, that's a principle. It's not picking teams. Well, I think it's good to treat a human body this way. But if you're a woman, then I think it's good not to listen to them or to take away their rights or tell them what to do. That kind of crap that you see fascists, that we politely call right-wingers or conservatives nowadays. But it's fascism. Well, actually, is what we're understanding. It's a group bound by a common embracing of the pathologos. Because that's what it means to conserve, to hold on to our false beliefs that we got from childhood. It's no surprise that they are people who are dearly identified with the kind of things you get from your childhood. Religion, you don't learn religion, you just get the one you're born into because it's faith, it's a rejection of understanding. Same thing with prejudice. I like the white people. Ah, interesting. If I was a betting man, I would say you grew up in a white family. Well, yeah, of course. So the sorts of people who embrace and take that as their identity and their highest virtue, they take the pathologos, vice, as their highest virtue. That's what it means to be conservative, to prevent progression, learning, change, evolving. And you better be progressive because you start as a human being with your problem, with your pathologos. If you ain't progressing, you are sick. Pathos, sick, logos, belief. Or understand, or yeah, reasoning. Sick belief, pathologos. So it's no surprise that it's these conservatives, polite way of saying fascists, or those bound together by a shared way of being characterized by their particular pathologos. It's no surprise that they are the ones who want to tell women what to do, oppress people, treat women badly, create a fake hierarchy where they are on top because that's the way they were born. I was born a man, so I'm better. I was born white, so I'm better. I was born Christian, so I'm better. Hey, applies to all colors. In other words, those principles are true because it's a paradigm of understanding that particularities are different for each different person and each different culture. So you can look at the Germans, whose pathologos was picked up on by Hitler and was able to manipulate them that way. And you can compare it to Netanyahu, functioning in the same way, very fascist, doing genocide, same thing, but he is personifying a different way of being that's particular to their culture. And enough families reflecting that, then he's going to get elected. Same thing with Trump. Comically, absurdly fascist. Like literally, at the time of recording, his former Secretary of State came out and declared, yes, he is a fascist. And here is the definition, and here is him ticking all the boxes. So literally, he's a fascist. Well, then why is he getting 50% of the vote? That's what we're understanding here. So as above, so below, okay? It helps us to understand the world that we're living in, but more importantly, we want to understand ourselves. Why are we 50% fascist? Until we learn this. And hey, if the pathologos has the power to block the logos, then it's even more powerful than the logos. So it's not even fair to say 50%. It'd be above 50%. Now, you could say, well, that's not fair because we're not always acting out our pathologos. That's also true. But the times when you have to be your best, when you're facing your highest development of understanding, or your highest experiences, or spiritual experiences, or you're in the presence of beauty, or you're doing something most meaningful, that's when it's almost guaranteed your pathologos is going to jump on in. Because that's his role. Pathologos functions as a block. It's not a block unless it's blocking your development. Development is literally a development along the paradigm towards excellence. These are just all definitions that we are picking up. So yeah, we're not always in it unless we're always seeking our highest excellence. Then we have lots of opportunities to get information from our mind about the nature of our block so we can use the art of philosophical midwifery to address it and free ourselves. So if we're pursuing excellence by doing our walking meditation, in other words, we're always doing the dialectic anyway, but doing it with the logos, doing it with virtue, if that's our goal, to always be in that state, reflecting on self and the nature of being with the dialectic at all times, seeing the logos reflected in every single thing that comes up in your everyday, in your daydreams, in your fantasies, in your night dreams, then we're going to be getting lots of blocks, which fortunately for us, is gold, because that's what we write down, like we've been writing down in these tables, and that's what we apply our focus to organize according to the dialectic. And if we do that on our blocks, according to this art of midwifery that we're learning, we will be able to become free. So take us all the way back to the opening of this chapter. So long as we're doing that, using the logos and dialectic to unpack these gifts that we're always given by our mind, we are therefore verifying it is entirely possible to verify for ourselves that we are part of a caring and intelligible universe. The verification is a kind of proof, since it's a way of understanding, as based on the realization that our mind is constantly communicating with us and for our benefit. That's what we were just describing. This is the awesome paragraph, the best paragraph. So, not only is that something that we are seeing, so long as we are following the logos in both philosophy and midwifery, applied to what's true and false, both purification and perfection. Why? The dialectic has two parts. Formally, what if beauty exists in being? That's part A. And what if it doesn't? What if it's just an appearance? Part A and part B. Both have 4 categories. So it's 8. So we are a walking dialectic. We have to learn mastery of the pathologos. What if the logos doesn't? What if self and reality isn't the highest? That's what our pathologos believes. And what if it is? So that also, this paragraph also, if it is entirely possible to verify for oneself we are part of a caring and intelligible universe, any belief that says otherwise is a red flag or an alarm bell or a gift to be unpacked, because it's an aspect of your pathologos. So we talked about reductionism, saying, oh no, we're not living in an actually intelligible universe, an intelligence that's understandable and knowable. It's all just physical chemicals. Reductionism. Yeah, if you think that, keep this first paragraph in mind and go, that's a pathologos. Let me take some notes. How does it feel? What words come up? What patterns can I see? Because ultimately there are going to be clues, because being a philosopher is like being Sherlock Holmes, but in the highest way. Clues for us to trace back to its cause. Once again, causes. What's the cause? You can talk about how it's playing out in the present with your state of mind and those words. How it's going to affect your future. Well, if I firmly believe it's all just stuff and squirting chemicals, my future means I'm never going to reach truth and being. I'm never going to fulfill my destiny. And whatever my reincarnation is going to be kind of crappy. And I'm probably going to have a crappy time in the afterlife, or at least not as good as I could have if I reject my purpose here. So you can use it to understand your future, how it plays out in your present, states of mind, words, inner voice, and how it's history through your past. When have you pursued something meaningful and that lie has come up, that pathologos has come up to say, hey, don't pursue that meaningful goal. It's all just chemicals. Who cares? Give up. Don't make that painting beautiful. It's all just chemicals on a canvas. It's all just paint. Who cares? Just hand in whatever. How did that work out for you? So you can trace its history through your past. Now, ultimately, we want to do all 3 of that, tracing it back to its cause. That's what we're addressing. That's what it means to be rational. That's a fundamental aspect of the dialectic. And that's also what we understood last time as maturity. Hooray for us. I don't want to eat a monkey. I want to find causes. All right. So, back to the board. That's not the board. So, given all that we said, I hope you've taken on that. I hope you've accepted the exercise, the gift, to do this. fill in the rest of this table. Take the terms we got last time that were of the negative and fill out for yourself what would be the positive. Retaining an image of authority is to do with the bad or the pathologos or the immature. You were in a dependent relationship when you got, all of this were the conditions or causes for the transmission of the pathologos, the conditions or causes for it. You could only have gotten your pathologos because, again, it's not an understanding and learning, it's a dumb belief. So where do we get dumb beliefs? Where do we get our racist beliefs? Where do we get our, I don't know, whatever beliefs? Sexist beliefs? All of the kinds of negative beliefs, religious beliefs that are against or opposed to evidence and understanding and are not learned through evidence and understanding. You had to have got it through belief. You had to have retained an image of authority. In other words, if you have to believe someone else because you've been told that your understanding and knowledge is crap, because either your mind is crap, that's the universe, that's reality, consciousness, or yourself is crap, that's the self, or the logos is crap, there's the triad, self, mind, or reality, and the logos, there's our triad. So you've been told that's rubbish because you're a sinner or you're a woman or understanding is the devil or something like that, all that crap. Then, well, okay, I can't think for myself. That's why we have to sacrifice what we know through our personal experience. Well, what do we believe? What's our standard for how we think? This nasty critter, authority. You have to be young enough to still have a retaining image of authority. Oh, mummy and daddy is the wise ones, not dumb old me. That's why you can't develop a pathologos when you reach, bless me, when you reach adulthood. And equally so, the kind of authority figures that you curtail to, find yourself maybe even unwantingly cowering to, being obedient to, being a slave to, are authority figures that reflect the one you had before you had maturity, before you had communication, language, understanding, logos. So back when you were a bibby and you had your image of authority, that you needed that to accept this bollocks belief. Bollocks is an Australian and I think British word that means bad, nonsense. It has no other definitions. Don't worry about Googling it. You had to be in a dependent relationship. It costed you to question. May have even costed you your life to question the bollocks being played to you. You were young, had to sacrifice what you knew through your personal experience. So over here, you can talk about what it would have been like if you didn't. Or if you become free of this, what would you be? Would you be going back to where you left off? If so, where would you be? What would be your new quest? Your life wouldn't be a dialectic between this false belief and your identity. In other words, a stagnant non-development where you become more and more identified with this nonsense belief that's false, becomes your persona, becomes your mask, becomes your way of being, and eventually becomes your identity. I'll probably give you an illness and cause the kind of cancer you get, kind of thing. So you give up that, well then what are you going to be in a dialectic? Because you're still a human being, you're still in a conversation, in a relationship through time. That's the dialectic. So what is your self-identity going to be like? If you are going back to knowledge based on personal experience. Hang on a second. Isn't this exactly philosophy? Developing what's needed for knowledge through understanding, dianoia, dialectic, and then having a direct personal experience of those things you've been understanding. Beauty itself, being itself. justice itself. And then applying your understanding to it. So it's not just a one-off trip like many spiritual traditions or yogas. You're actually developing an understanding of it, which allows you to go into it and gain a better knowing until ultimately you can even go beyond it and know thyself. Know the self. So those are some possibilities that you can use. See what is, don't use my words, of course. Use your highest understanding and your highest vision, which is being mature. Why? Because that was on our previous table. Revealing yourself in a wide range of ways. That means using your self highest understanding and your self highest vision. Okay. So what happens? We have an image of authority. We're in a dependent relationship. We're in our youth. We sacrifice what we know through our personal experience in order to get a belief transmitted, which has enormous consequences. Oh my goodness, yes. Wow. The most consequences. Super significant. On every level, the pathologos. So now that you have, through this kind of reflection, hopefully understood for yourself the nature why it's a belief that has enormous consequences, you again have some reason that you can practice the virtue of courage to hold on to when that other voice comes up and says, do something else. There's a sports ball game on. Or, hey, get on that grind set and start making some dollar bills. Or, go make your muscles big so you can be a Sigma. All of those kinds of things that distract you from this, you now have the understanding that you can hold on to with courage to be also practicing courage, which is what we saw last time was an aspect of maturity. Because it's literally false. By reason, by definition. Because this belief has the most consequences. So why are you spending your time doing anything other than addressing that which has the greatest and most negative consequences in your life? Not just in this life. That's another thing. We are talking about the soul. Which means, hey, those muscles you get, that money you get, those Instagram likes you get, you can't take them with you beyond these 80 years. If you're lucky, 80 years. Whereas what we are doing here is something that we are born into, so there had to be something from our previous lives causing us to pick this part of history in this family where we're guaranteed to get this kind of pathologos, and there is an impact to our soul and our spiritual experiences, our kind of bad trips we might have, which also is the same thing as our death experiences, separating the soul from the body. So as we read in philosophy, has an effect on where you go in being, what level of being you go to, and whether you not only escape the chains of your problems, to use Socrates' expression, but escape the prison of reincarnation. In other words, this is not only the most consequential in our life, it's the most consequential for all of our lives, eternity. Now do your maybe 80 years, 40 years of Instagram fame and big bank account, weigh that against infinity time. What's most worth doing? Infinity time. So if that voice says, hey, don't do this, turn off this philosophical midwifery podcast to do something else, that's a pathologos. Or might be pointing to, or might be an expression of, or might be a clue about a more fundamental pathologos. An aspect. An eidos. An aspect. Not eidos. Eidos is an aspect of being, and those aspects are eternal. The aspects of the pathologos is its inverse, its shadow. It's not real. It's side B of the dialectic. If you do a dialectic on being, you'll say, well, if being exists, what follows? Well, then there are aspects, because being has to exist, so we can say existence. It has to be most beautiful. It has to be intelligible, so the logos is in there. It has to be just perfectly the way it needs to be. So these are all aspects. So this would be side A. What would happen if being exists? But that's not complete understanding. That's not the dialectic. You also have to do side B. What if it doesn't exist? Well, you could say, well, here's something that also has eidos, but doesn't exist. Pathologos. The pathologos doesn't exist. It's not real. It has an effect as a psychic parasite, cause of our problems with enormous effect, enormous consequences. But those aspects are like ideas, but it's its shadow, it's distorted reflection. Because it ain't being, non-being. So that's pretty neat. And what did I just do then? I just used an understanding of one side, our understanding of the eidos, existence, being, logos, justice, the things that we apply the dialectic to in philosophy, to develop an understanding of, and as a spiritual practice, because this kind of understanding is no different from meditation. It's the paradigm of meditation. So it's also the doorway into the nous, the direct experience of those things, which is why Socrates calls it the self-study of philosophy. So I took what we've been learning in philosophy and I applied it to the other side. That's metaphor, allowing me to address one of the questions we've been carrying, and I've been carrying. Do we have one pathologos or many? Because the book uses it both ways. So in other words, our author is literally giving us that puzzle. He's helping us. If we're reading carefully, we'll know, oh, hopefully we would have picked up that question. Well, this is a way of developing a hypothesis. And if, don't know it's true, it's a hypothesis we can carry in our hypothesis sack, which is in our inventory, by metaphor. What is over here in the plus? What would it be in the negative? That's a way of thinking, a way of learning, an aspect of the dialectic, a way of generating new hypotheses and maybe even insights. And that's what we were encouraging our group, our watchers to do with this. So everything in this, do that there. That was just another example of it, another practice of it. So what would be the opposite or the positive of the shadow, the distorted shadow in the pathologos of having a belief with enormous tragic consequences? That's for you to fill out. Next one, concealing from the child. So in order to get the pathologos, the parents had to conceal from the child that the actors were acting out an act. It was all a big play. And they didn't tell the kid that. What would be the opposite of concealing from your child or from any child? What would be the opposite of actors acting out an act? That's for you. Accepting the act and performance as real. So this was the one that the author gave us both sides of. And Plato does this, and Socrates does this as well. He'll set out all these things and he'll give us one. Kind of like a clue or a head start. Like, hey, by the way, same thing in video games. They'll say, an NPC character will show you, oh, by the way, you can move these statues around. If I move this statue, that's a hexagon shape, and I put it on the hexagon shape on the floor, this door opens. Now that I've shown you that it can be done, this statue can connect with this shape. Now you can play the game. Now you go and do it. So if it's a paradigm, it should also work for video games. It has to, because it's the paradigm. So in a similar way to good video game design, necessary video game design, beautiful what? Hang on a second. Good video game design, beautiful video game design, necessary or just video game design. These are the aspects of being that we were just referring to. So in other words, the paradigm that applies in the highest sense to being should also be a paradigm you use in everything else you do. Even understanding your pathologos, as we just did now, but also designing video games, playing music, writing short stories, doing your paintings, whatever it is that you're doing with your time as your skill or hobby or art. Of course, along with this art and this art, you can also use that in this metaphorical way to shed light on philosophy and midwifery. So we can say there's a triad that has evolved. Midwifery, the dialectic on our pathologos, philosophy, or philodianoia, the logos applied to, the logos, and the dialectic applied to the logos, and whatever else we do, whatever other skill or art or activity we do. So that's really neat because you can have fun using that third thing as a metaphor to help people that you care about, or people who are of the kind of maturity and with the kind of integrity that they would therefore be open and curious about this kind of reflection. Those sort of people, I hope you have friends in your life like that, because philosophy isn't a solo quest. With those people, to explain these concepts, you can use whatever art that you have. Hey, video games, like I just did, video games have to do this with the statues and the shapes on the ground, to talk about this principle that we're learning of discovery through metaphor, and how to write, because our author had to give us one. And even better if your friend has a shared interest. He's my friend because we game together. He's my friend because we play music together. Or he also has an interest in film, so we sometimes talk about films we like. There you go. You have a shared activity in the physical world of becoming. So long as you are pursuing this with excellence. So you say, hey, by the way, you know how the great movies are great because of this? And if your friend says, what? The great movies? I don't care about thinking about what's a better and lesser movie. I don't care about the excellence of film. I just like what's I like. Not only would that be a stupid conversation that won't go anywhere, a dumb conversation, boring conversation, you're prevented from that activity fulfilling its purpose, because its purpose is to, well, the purpose is destiny and escaping fate. That's our purpose. Anything else we do can only be serving our purpose if it does that too. If you're not seeking the excellence, wondering what's the best film, who's the best filmmaker, why are these the best thing, then you're not looking for the principles of excellence that you can then use as metaphor to talk about philosophy or talk about midwifery. So not only would it be a boring ass conversation, you'd be missing a trick. You're missing out. So that's one of the principles of being in this game, seeking excellence. So much so that we should delete this scribble for a bit. So we have this already on the board. What it means to be a philosopher. We have our, where's our little dude? Here we are. Oh, there's us. Now we haven't put it in, so it's time to put it in now. So given what we've seen, what does it mean to be a philosopher? Well, you're on an adventure with it. You're on an adventure, you're on a quest. You're a spiritual adventurer. That's why you look like this guy. You have to be looking for the key terms in philosophy and midwifery, putting them in these like little tables we've been doing, looking for the order, looking for patterns in the text. Coming up with new questions. We can use that new tool, metaphor. I have a question about what's here because I just saw something over here. So your insights, your exclamation marks can become question marks. So that's pretty cool. So we can, let's put that, because that's such a cool principle. We can put our exclamation marks can become question marks. What I just saw on this side of the table, I can wonder about what's over here. This is a way of generating questions. That's the metaphor thing that we're looking at. What I just saw about film, I can wonder about how does that apply to philosophy of midwifery? And vice versa. What I just saw about philosophy, I could apply it to film or video game design. So that's developing questions and carrying it, because to carry a question is to be on a quest. And by the way, if you do ask this question and you are looking for key terms, patterns, and orders. And so we can also say the dialectic now, because that is the paradigm of the terms order and patterns. Because the patterns, terms, and order, you could say, well, hang on a second. When I'm building a house, I need key terms like wood and nails and things, but they'll have to be ordered in a certain way that makes a house. And that should follow certain patterns to how to construct that house. for a certain goal, so having somewhere for people to live. All of that's contained in the blueprints. You need blueprints. Now, paradigm is a fancy word for the blueprints of everything blueprints. So we can say that's the dialectic. So that's the paradigm that we are using to organize the things that we're pulling out that are significant. And what we also saw today is adding to this wonderful diagram of us. It's a self-portrait. That's you, right? Put it on as your Facebook or Instagram profile picture. That's exactly what you look like. Also, seeking excellence. Because how else are you going to uncover your pathologos? And by the way, how else are you going to reach your destiny? If your highest excellence is your destiny, how are you going to reach it if you're not seeking excellence? That also applies to what we just saw, excellence with friendship. We have a shared interest with your friend in film, what makes good film. If we're not seeking excellence, if we're not looking at what makes films great or video games great or whatever our shared interest is, what makes them great, how can we use it for this to generate questions? Otherwise, what are we doing? And there's a fancy word for that. Not seeking excellence, not having your conversations around the highest key terms, the highest order, the highest pattern, the dialectic version, the highest. Now, there are lots of fun colloquial expressions. Some people might call it bloviating. Some people call it shit talking, blowing hot air. In Australia, sometimes they say, don't blow smoke up my ass. In America, you would say, don't blow smoke up my ass. Another word for it is gossip. You're just gossiping. Oh, that movie was good. Why? I don't know. I liked it. Oh, Janie did something I don't like. Well, okay. Can we look about what her excellence is and what prevented her so we can have a conversation reflecting on her excellence that was blocked? Because every human being has a block. That's a pathologos. Pathologos, and every human being is on the logos to seek our destiny. So can we ask that about Janie? No, I just think she's a basic bitch. Oh, I shouldn't say bitch. That sounded mean. Didn't feel right. Sometimes I could swear, like when I said blowing smoke up my ass. That sounded right, but calling someone a basic B sounded weird out of my mouth. So maybe it's because I'm making fun of people who talk that way. So no, I'm not seeking excellence for Janie. I just think she is SKIBIDI. Now, I don't know whether SKIBIDI is good or bad. I'm hearing reports that it's both, or it's nothing, or it can be either. So yeah. Either way, if it's not excellence, it's gossip. I just think Jenny is totally SKIBIDI. Now, in a year, anybody seeing this in the future, you will look at me like, what the hell is he talking about, SKIBIDI? It was a thing that existed for a small amount of time. I don't know. Actually, it's based on this. I'm literally I'm talking about. Actually, no. I'm going to try and elevate. I'll talk about SKIBIDI in the excellence. It has become a YouTube animated series called Machinima because it's using animation techniques usually for video games. So the same video games that are used to design, the same programs used to design video games and cutscenes in video games, people can use it to make their own little animations. Now, there's one guy called Dafokboom, Dafaqbom, something like that, who has made a huge series of very short little animations based on Machinima. Because his first one was really popular. Because his first one was really good in a weird he found two he found a couple of different memes or interesting themes that were resonating with culture globally. Like this guy doing a dance, this fat guy with a big fat belly doing a dance to a strange song, and some other things. And he sort of brought it together, and some a Western pop. So I think that was Mediterranean or Middle Eastern guy, but also mashed it up with some very, very popular Western dance music and some other things. So he brought these really within pop culture kinds of excellences, and he brought it together in this weird little film that was also like, the animation itself was something he's developed over a large amount of time, many different iterations of his version of his take on this machinima to create something that had its own kind of style and was intriguing for some almost unexplainable reason. So that was his first SKIBIDI toilet little animation, and it was kind of within this field, within this medium, it was a kind of excellence. It pulled from the highest terms of Mediterranean, Middle Eastern and Western music culture. He used the patterns of machinima that had been developing and his own way of ordering it, and he told his own kind of story in a very succinct way. So maybe we could even see there was a kind of storytelling or dialectic within it. So anyway, it resonated and people were intrigued by it. Like our souls seek excellence. So when we see evidence of this sort of stuff, we're drawn to it. Often it becomes viral or a meme or interesting. And he spun that initial interest in that initial video into this huge series that was getting like 50 to 100 million views within like hours of it being posted. It was quite amazing. Anyway, the name of the first little skit was SKIBIDI, because that was a lyric from that mashup song he made. Skibbity doop doop doop, skibbity what? Yes, yes. I don't know how it goes, but something like that. And so that's where the name SKIBIDI. But now it's it's strange because the word SKIBIDI seems to be used ambiguously. In other words, sometimes people use it good, sometimes people use it bad. They don't really know what it means, but they know that they like the word, which is interestingly a reflection of the art itself. It's weird. You don't know if it's good or if it's bad or if it's scary or if it's brilliant or if it's just disgusting or if it's brain rot. You don't know, so you don't know whether it's positive or negative, but you kind of know that it's interesting in some way. So it's funny that the language reflected the thing that it's based on. Anyway, so that's an example of how you can even turn the most basic seeming thing that you can have a shared interest with your friends and 100 million other YouTube viewers, so long as you are using it, not just say, hey, SKIBIDI, that's funny, or hey, I like SKIBIDI, but you try and pull out the key terms, orders, patterns, dialectic. In other words, you seek the excellence of it. What made it excellence, or how can it even be improved? So long as you add that, you can even make SKIBIDI into something that can serve your destiny. So long as seeking excellence. Now, you can say, well, I'm going to dismiss SKIBIDI because it's too weird, or it has toilet in it, or whatever, it's too popular. But no, come on, that's just being a bit silly. You could say, well, film is popular, music is popular, and he is using various music and machine and animation styles and new mediums for distribution. So he's pulling from a lot of different areas. So even though it's weird, don't dismiss it out of hand. Which means if you could even apply this kind of reflection, so long as you're seeking excellence, so long as you're using whatever you see in one to gain questions or hypotheses about philosophy or midwifery, If you can even do it to SKIBIDI toilet, you can do it to anything. Which means what? It's something you can do at all times. You're never not in the game. You're never not seeking excellence. And if I can do it to SKIBIDI toilet, you can do it to anything. In other words, if meditation is a single-minded focus, doing a single activity for 30 minutes every morning or whatever, then you can make, well, then there's no difference between being a human being on his quest or a philosopher. Same thing. We're all philosophers in that sense. There's no different from that in meditation. So long as you are and the word for if you're not doing that, one word is gossip. You can say, I'm just gossiping. I like this. I don't like this. Who cares? But we've already seen that, haven't we? Like, we are using our understanding on the highest possible terms. The terms that we address in philosophy are literally the highest of our language. Beauty itself, justice itself, goodness itself. You don't have higher words than that. Bliss. And even in terms of thinking, same and different. Everything is same and different. Same as something, different as something. Everything is either a whole or a part. Everything is either one or many. So these are the terms also that are addressed in philosophy. So they're literally the highest experiences and the highest use of reason. So we apply the dialectic to that. But the pathologos is the worst. It's worse even than SKIBIDI. The pathologos is literally the most dangerous, the most destructive, has enormous negative consequences, keeps you chained to your problems, keeps you imprisoned in the cycles of reincarnation. And according to the Phaedo, you can even get stuck in negative places in the afterworld if you really reject your purpose here. So you could say, well, I apply the dialectic to what's even worse than SKIBIDI, what's literally the cause of human problems and suffering. So yeah, of course I can do it with anything. Be a walking meditation. And by the way, you are anyway. We are all masters of meditation. The difference is we are unconsciously doing a dialectic on this. That's what we talked about. We are in a dialectic with our false belief about self and reality that becomes our image, our persona, our mask, our way of being, and eventually our identity. In other words, you're harming yourself if you don't play the game. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to sit on the sidelines. No. You're either virtue or vice. There's no in between. You're not on the sidelines. You are going to be doing a dialectic on your pathologos if you're not doing a dialectic on the logos. What does that mean? Well, then hopefully we can figure out a way of doing a dialectic on the logos at all times, because if we're not, we are listening to that voice that says don't do that, which means we are identifying that voice with truth and beauty, knowledge, all of those aspects that are actually in being. We are listening to its shadow, because why listen to that voice unless you think it's knowing, unless you think it's true, unless you think it's caring for you? If that's the case, we better find something we can do. We better find a way of doing the dialectic on the logos at all times, because otherwise we are undoing all our good work. That may have taken us lifetimes to have reached a human form, that happened to be born in a period of history where we can actually read Socrates, which hasn't been allowed for 1500 years. And even in the last couple of hundred years, all of the translations of Socrates has been garbage, literally the opposite of what was true. Because all the translators had pathologos, which functions to block the logos. And if Socrates is functioning at the highest level of logos, of course the translator is going to be rubbish. And if all of the lectures haven't been doing midwifery, of course they're going to be adhering to mistranslations that support their unsuspected false beliefs. Because we're human. So why are you born, if you're watching this video, you're born in a part of history where you can learn the logos, right before our inevitable destruction if we don't learn the logos, because not only is does the belief have enormous consequences, we've seen how it plays out as above, so below. So as our soul, so politically or socially. And politically and socially, we have something called nuclear weapons. So the impact, the tragic, enormous consequences of our pathologos can be played out with, well, we've got genocides and stuff happening now. We've got mass incarceration because people make dollar bills off prison systems. We've got mass exploitation through capitalism. But we also can blow us all up with nuclear Armageddon. So that's the inevitable consequences of our not learning the logos. So we're right on the cusp. So you can ask the question, why was I born right on the cusp between either learning the logos, which we haven't been able to do until now, and our destruction of the human race, the inability to learn the logos. No learning of the logos for humans. Humans are gone. So why are you born into a species which has the capacity to get a pathologos and a logos at the strange period of time where we have the possibility of both? So you may have done, especially if you're watching, and picked a life where you come across this video. One of a small group of people who are fortunate enough to come across this discovery and have the kind of character that has made them interested and hold on to it even when everybody else says don't do it, or even when the pathologos says don't do it, even when there's not a lot of philosophers up here and down here in Australia. You happen to come across a rare sort of person familiar with this to tell you, hey, philosophy ain't a solo quest. Let's play. You can play. You're supposed to play. And you're a philosopher, Harry. If you're watching this video, strange that you are, I wonder why. In other words, maybe you have done certain kind of good work in your previous lives, in previous reincarnations, to be in this very puzzling, very curious part of history and time. For humanity especially. In which case, don't undo your good work by not doing a dialectic on the logos at all times, in a certain state of curiosity, looking for patterns and structure and all those sorts of things, pulling out key terms, seeking excellence in everything you do. Because if you're not, you're going to be doing it anyway, whether you like it or not. You're just letting the pathologos take over. You will be interpreting everything not through the logos, but through your pathologos. You will be pulling out key terms that support your rubbish belief. Look, this proves that I suck. This proves that reality stinks. This proves that understanding is garbage. You are looking for key terms that will justify your false belief. So there's your key terms. You will be creating dramas that will create the patterns that will inevitably play out the implications of your pathologos, which will then confirm your pathologos and protect its existence. You'll be doing that anyway if you're not seeking excellence and doing your best to apply the logos, looking for the logos in everything you do, even the pathologos, even in SKIBIDI toilet, and structuring it with the dialectic as well in everything you do. Use your dialectic. Structure your conversations in that way. Structure your thinking in that way. When you have these terms of the table, you got some key terms, structure it. Can you put that within the definition, demonstration, division, and conclusion, which has synthesis and analysis, self to self, self to other, others to other others, and others back to self? Can you structure it with this? As best you can. You're not supposed to get it right. You're supposed to be puzzled and challenged. You're supposed to do it anyway. That's courage. Because if you're not, all of that good work that you must have done to be here right now, watching this right now, you are undoing by doing a dialectic, allowing the negative pathologos, allowing that big bag of rubbish that you got from someone else, caused you, that you sacrifice what you know from your own experience to get. You're letting that dictate your dialectic. You are a blind, ignorant slave to a shitty master. You sacrifice being consciously in charge, self-mastery that you are here to practice. You are sacrificing the practice and development of self-mastery to be a slave to the worst possible master. If you're not consciously seeking the logos, seeking excellence, and seeking to apply the dialectic in everything you do. Owen Wilson thinks that's amazing. And so do his 4 brothers. And hopefully you do too. So, think about this. Even if you don't actually make the table, maybe if you find yourself out of this internal dialogue for a few minutes in a day, does this give you something to wonder about? Any of these question marks? What would it be like to translate them? You can do that little mental exercise while you're on the bus, while you're making dinner. Wonder about it. And then wonder about what would it be like to if I did come up with answers, could I arrange them into some sort of mini dialectic? What would that be like? It's something to puzzle on. Which breaks you out of this and gives you an opportunity to develop this, which is what we're here for. All right, so that's the kind of stakes. So all of this, you could say everything we've just been reflecting about today. Take all those points, take all those points, write them down, all the ones that stood out to you from this reflection that we've gone through today, especially skibidi toilet, because skibidi is a fun word. And can you structure it in terms of DDD, or AS? Because if you do, you will have a fantastic, because the conclusion is other back to self. You end with a greater definition, other back to self. You end with a really neat definition. And all of that is a definition of this one right here. Right? So we're saying, what would happen if we seek excellence, everything we're learning about excellence in that little picture of the wizard, and seek the logos in everything, and seek to arrange it and structure it with the dialectic? That would be the opposite of being stuck as a slave to a dialectic of a belief with enormous consequences, and the consequences not only include the problems in your life, but undoing or dismantling all of the good work you've done in previous lives, and your opportunities for even greater lives beyond this incarnation, if you do your work here. So that's all of what we've been talking about have been the enormous consequences of a transmitted belief based on these conditions that we've been understanding. So all of that we've been talking about today is a possibility for this. So wonder about it. And show yourself, express yourself, share in the comment section or join the Discord and share in one of the categories of the Discord what it was like to wonder about it. Did it change you? Did it affect you? Did it frustrate you? Were you full of aporia and confusion and frustration because you were completely out at sea? Did it give you an insight? Did it inspire you? Did you come up with something? What did you come up with? Share it. Did you even structure it in a fun way to practice the dialectic which we're here to master? So what do we call that? Maturity. Why? Because if you do that, you are revealing yourself in a wide range of ways, and you are doing it based on your highest understanding, which takes courage because it's not something we normally do. It's very much easier to talk about gossip. In other words, it's rare. So you're a rare kind of courage and understanding and maturity, revealing yourself in all of these kinds of ways. So you are also not only practicing the opposite of being chained to your negative dialectic, but you're also practicing what our new definition of what it means to be mature. and what it means to have courage, and what it means to be a rare bird. We philosophers are rare birds. So that's the invitation, and that's another look at why we're doing it, why we're reading the text in this kind of way, how we are going to read moving forward. We're going to be doing our best to look for these kinds of tables, looking for a plus and a negative, or a one and a self and another. It doesn't have to be negative. Film could be the other, and self could be midwifery, or self could be philosophy, and music could be another. So looking for self and other, so that we can have an insight in one, that we can develop a question in the other. We're looking for parts of the text like this, where he might give us a bunch in one, so that we have to figure out the rest. So we're discovering questions in the text. And we're realizing that the reason why we read in this way is not only because we're reading properly, following what the author wants us to do, and that's why we read, but also we are practicing the logos and dialectic, which is exactly what we're here to master. And if we don't, whoops. If we don't, the implications of all this follows for us. So, find things to wonder about, and do your best to wonder in this way if you can. And if you feel like sharing it, please do. In the comment section or in Discord, or join on Twitch. You can comment in real time. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for our new chatter today. I hope you've found something to be puzzled about, and I hope you enjoy that puzzlement for the rest of the day. I will see you next time. Puzzle face.